Greetings, Manchester. You're in tune to the search engine. Legacy 90.1. Big shout goes out to the one and only Tiny G, Dancing DJ, Drive Time DJ, every Thursday, 4 till 7, original time, not COVID time. Okay, move on. This evening, as always, talk, chat, debate, discussion, and as always, your views and opinions, questions wanted, needed, and much appreciated. Text line number 07599642626, and you can call the studio on 0161 2225636, and we are also online this evening on Facebook at Legacy 90.1 FM and on YouTube at SEUK Global. You can share your views on the text here on YouTube and on Facebook. So get involved. And the show this evening, it's Across the Atlantic show. And we're talking to policing, about policing. And we're talking to two retired police officers, both together with over 60 years experience of being in the force. One is joining us from Washington DC, and then we've got our very own Charles Crichlow. Both have been the head of the Black police associations in their respective cities, towns, countries. As I said, tirelessly working. Let me start with giving you just a bit of insight into both of these brothers, and then we can, get going. Let's bring them in. Okay, so let's start. We've got Ronald Hampton that we're going to be speaking to this evening, and Ronald is a retired from the DC Metropolitan Police Department after 23 years of serving as a community relations officer. He is reputed for his outstanding work with the citizens of the 3rd District in Washington, D.C. in crime prevention and community participation and relations. His extensive experience and knowledge in community relations and policing has resulted in education and training opportunities for Mr. Hampton locally, nationally, and internationally. Ronald is the immediate past executive director of the National Black Police Association Incorporated and presently the Washington, D.C. representative for Blacks in Law Enforcement of America. Additionally, he serves as a law enforcement fellow at the University of the District of Columbia Institute for Public Safety and Justice. And that's only a bit. You can go online, put his name in online, and you will see that he's very active, involved in loads of things. In fact, Charles reminded me earlier before we started that we've actually met Ronald in person, and we're going to touch on that as we move on with the show. And of course, I said to you before, we've also got Charles Crichlow, and Charles is a former police officer, served 30 years with Greater Manchester Police. Yes, Greater Manchester Police. He was elected as the president of the Black and Asian Police Association and served that position for 4 years. He is an active member of the community and which he lives and oftentimes represents, supports, shares awareness on various community groups around the community, policing and more. He is a graduate of Manchester University School of Law and holds a master's in criminology. His research focused on measures to reduce serious violence within the Black communities and the UK. So we're going to be talking to both Charles and Ronald this evening. As always, your views and opinions are wanted, needed, and much appreciated. I will say, as always, that the views and opinions expressed on the search engine this evening are not necessarily the views and opinions of Legacy Radio. We're not here to upset, offend, but we're here to encourage debate, discussion, build awareness, and chat. So get involved. And as I said, you can get involved on Facebook, Legacy 90.1 FM, on YouTube, SEUK Global. You can send us a text on 599642626, and you can also call the studio if you would like to ask the brothers questions directly on 0161 222 5636. That's 0161 222 5636, and I'm sure they'll be very glad to hear your voice as I would as well. So let me go over and say good evening to whatever, just say good evening to both Charles and Ron. Given that you're joining us so from so far, Ron, I'm going to say good evening to you first of all. So thank you for joining us and accepting my invitation. I know it's been a while. I mean, I did listening on one of the enforcement law events earlier this year, which was very impressive. Very much from my perspective. Obviously, I'm not a police officer, but I'm always, as I'm sure many other people are very conscious and want to know what goes on in the mind, not just of a police officer, but what goes on in the mind of specifically Black police officers. Because I do think there's a certain time, not for everybody, but I know when you go, and very much different now, and Charles can probably say something on that as well. But in my era growing up, you know, the police were a position to admire, a position to aspire to. And I know for myself, as a young person, up until probably I was about 11, I did think about wanting to be a police officer. It was the riots that took place here in Manchester and Moss Side that changed my mind about that, having been chased down the road by police. But yeah, it's an area that definitely we have a lot of issues about, but none of them are about saying that we don't need police at all. So just like for yourself, I gave a bit of the introduction because I really wanted to start the conversation and get involved into that. So just at the moment, because you are retired, so what is your? I know you've is it know your rights?
Oh yeah, we do some of that now. What know your rights kind of stuff that we do in the community, also in the schools and whatnot. We have over the years. But like you, I wanted to say, like you, I really didn't think nothing about being a police officer. I wasn't. When I came back, I'm a Vietnam veteran. I was in the service. When I came back home, I didn't think nothing about being a police officer. That was a sort of secondary idea that I had when some people approached me about doing it. I had my reservations about it because I confronted racism when we were in Vietnam, and when I came home, we were confronted with racism because I still served about 2 years when I got back home, and that was around late '60s, and I went on in '71. So you know, racism was very overt in this country, as well as we were fresh out of the civil rights struggle and the kind of things that were going on. So it's really been this has been an interesting a journey, and especially where we are now in terms of the journey.
Definitely, thank you for that. Charles, good evening.
Yes, good evening. A pleasant good evening to yourself and all of your listeners.
Okay, and thank you. I'm going to have to turn you up a bit there, I think. But yes, Charles, so last time we spoke on here, we wasn't able to do a face-to-face. We just did it online, and we talked about, and I think we'll definitely touch in that area of we talked about Taser. You wrote a paper about Taser, looking at issues in relation to the police force as to what they could probably look at to make themselves more accountable, more transparent, more open to scrutiny.
Yeah, well, just going back to your introduction, You know, I met Ron, you know, many years ago, and he has been, you know, a great mentor over the years. And the interesting thing is that, you know, the thing that drew me to him in particular is that he was very much focused on, you know, working from the community, not outside of the community, but everything that he was about was really focused on working alongside the community and developing with the community, and that really that attracted me very much so. And so when I said I retired this year, I thought that obviously it was right in the middle of the lockdown, and so I put together, well, what I call a brief manifesto. And it was really something to give to the community, if you like, yeah, because a lot of people, most of our people, we know that there's something wrong with the system. And I think sometimes we struggle to, you know, to get a handle on, you know, where to press the right buttons. So this document really was about, you know, transparency, as you said, accountability, scrutiny, about the type of education that I think police officers need. And the really important aspect, which I hope that we get a chance to delve into a bit, is about reparation, about reparatory justice. Because I think that one of the things I certainly believe is that a lot of what we get involved in is stuff that we're trying to undo. And therefore, I think there's an imperative to repair a lot of the damage that's been done to our communities. And I strongly believe that police and all the public institutions, they have to be about reparatory justice. Otherwise, you know, we're not going to move forward.
Okay, right. We're going to take a break and then we'll be right back. See you in a bit.
Feel the vibe on Legacy.
Okay, guys, thank you for that. We are still live online, but we're just playing the advert out on the air. The advert's about 3 minutes, so we'll be there. Just because what happened last time when I was doing a conversation last week, it was, and I went to an advert and we was in a conversation and I continued that same conversation on air and then went back on to the listeners, and I got a text saying, how could you do that? Just go off with the conversation. So, but it's quite good now because we've just done the introduction, so we can go back with an actual topic there, what's going on. But we can have a little chat of something that's crazy. Let me just go with Ron. I've been very busy lately, Ron. Has Donald actually decided to leave yet?
Donald. No, well, Donald has decided that he's not going to participate in anything. I think the realization has set in, but he is resisting everything. And so it came out today that he's not going to participate in the inaugural. He's not going to invite the family to the White House. He's not going to have any conversation with them. And I'm not surprised. I mean, he hasn't been cordial or cooperative about anything. So why would that change simply because he's on his way out? And he's a loser, and he behaves like a loser. And so he's going to continue to behave like a loser. Nothing is going to change. And good riddance, and I'm glad he's gone.
But as long as he continues on this stance, isn't that the more cracks that, not that America hasn't had cracks in it for the longest time, but he's widening them even more?
Well, you're absolutely right. But what this proves is that he was the wrong individual for a lot of reasons for the position that he won in 2016. And, you know, what happens sometimes is that in life, there are situations like this and there are lessons to be learned from it. And I just hope that America, not me, because I knew it wasn't I knew he wasn't hitting on anything from the very beginning because I remembered his past. See, you can't. Your past is a picture of your present and future, and his past is riddled with racism, discrimination, a whole lot of stuff. So I think he's a criminal too, quite frankly, because that's also part of his past, and it has bad out. So it's nothing has really surprised me about him, and I hope that those in America who call themselves the kingmakers and the power people come to some realization that this guy wasn't for the betterment or for the future of America.
And yeah, that was absolutely wonderful timing. Welcome back. You're on Tune to the Search Engine. And we are, as I said, online this evening. You can go on Facebook and listen, Legacy 90.1 FM, or on YouTube, SEUK Global. And you can get involved. Send us a text, 07599642626. We are this evening talking to Ronald Hampton from Washington, D.C. And we are also speaking with Charles Crichlow, both retired police officers, and with over, say 60 plus years between them. Both, I would say, definitely not your average type of police officer, and definitely not your average type of black police officer. They did make it all the way to retirement, so there's something special, most definitely, about them. And I know definitely for Charles that it hasn't been an easy road, but he's never been somebody who's backed away from a challenge or not stood up for what he thought was right. And the same, I'm aware, with Ron. Before we started the show, we had a little reminisce in the past about when I first would have met Ron without knowing, which was about 15 years ago.
Yeah, something like that, right?
When Charles, were you the president at that time of the Black and Asian Police Association?
Well,
go ahead, Charles.
No, well, I was the chair of the Black Police Association here in Manchester at the time, yeah. And just to put this into context, the relationship between Ron and the MBPA in America goes back all the way back into the 90s, when we were looking to establish, as a national organization, which came out of the London Metropolitan Police Black Police Association, started in 1994. And really, a lot of that came out of concerns around deaths in police custody, stop and search, all the issues that that you're familiar with. And we really felt that we needed to have a voice. And so when we looked across the Atlantic, we saw that the MBPA had been going for since the 1970s, and Ron was really an integral part of us launching here in the United Kingdom. And so they had a conference, a big conference every single year. And we actually, in all those years, we used to go over to America, and Ron would come here, and really we thought that we should do something outside of America. And I think we, in 2006, when I think there was about 200 and odd American law enforcement officers came here we had a big international conference. I think that was the first time actually that their conference was held outside of North America. And it was an extraordinary event. I think we marched nearly 1,000 individuals through South Manchester, Moss Side, Rusholme. And if you remember, we ended up at the Academy. And it was quite a big event.
It was.
I don't know what your recollections were, Ron.
Yeah. Oh no, it was fantastic. I still think about it today, and the driving force is that there had never ever been a gathering in somewhere other than North America. We had been to Canada, and our experience in Canada was the same as our experience in the UK. We heard about it. We had conversations with some key people, And then, you know, we reached out because I just felt like that it was necessary for us to know each other, for us to sit down in a room and talk. I used to have this, and I still do it today. I have this method, this thing that I do when I listen to people from all over the world talk about situations that they find themselves in as a result of the color of their skin. I close my eyes and listen to them talk. And when I listen to them talk, I'm comparing their experience with my experience. And the fact of the matter is that Charles and them experience in the UK is the same as my experience in Washington, D.C., going up against white supremacy. When I listen to the guys in Canada, when I listen to the guys in Bermuda, when I listen to the guys in the Caribbean, when I listen to the guys in South Africa, when we spent time in all of these places, I did the same exercise and the story was the same. So I said, well, why aren't we together? Why don't we have a regular communication process where we can share this? Because even though you know it's going on, you still feel like you're alone. And yet it just took time. I wanted to tell Charles this on this side, because we have been around all this time and doing things. There were actually people on my side who said, why are we going to Toronto? Why are we going to Manchester? Why are we going to Cleveland? There's a place in the UK that's named Cleveland, just like in Ohio, in the US. So why are we going to those places? And I just couldn't believe brothers and sisters would say those kind of things because, but then I understood that their vision was so short, was so limited in terms of this whole process. And but once we started, it was no stopping. And I just had a feeling that was going to be the case, because when I sit down and listen to them talk, and Charles was right. On my force, I believed in the community thing, and we talked about it in Canada, we talked about it in the UK, we talked about it in South Africa, because we didn't get there by ourselves. There's a reason why I became a police officer, even though I wasn't destined to be one, but there was a reason why I became a police officer, and I didn't know that reason at first, but it had all to do with me representing and being a part of the community that I came from, and representing myself and the people that produced me right there in the police department. And that we had to there are times we had to do some crazy things in order for that to happen. And Charles, I'm not even ashamed of it no more. I'm not. But I loved it, man. You know, I loved it so much that when times were when we couldn't travel over there, I really missed it. It was like being at home. So I've been back a couple of times since then, and I miss Charles, I miss David, I miss I've run into Leroy a couple of times in Canada, because I still get around to some of these places, because it's important to continue these relationships, man. But we're still Charles's manifesto. I think he was right on. There was no question. Those 4 things that he raised, it's the same key issues that we're raising in this country when we talk about policing, and we had to stay on it. We can't let up, because policing belongs to us. It don't belong to them. It don't belong to the people who go there every day. They represent us.
I think one of the things, just building on something Ron said there about it was really about solidarity, and not just solidarity among Black officers, but actually the whole idea was to show solidarity with our communities. And that was, I mean, it was much more than the march, but actually the whole idea of that march in our communities was to a visible display of solidarity with our own communities. Because if we don't have solidarity with our own communities, we might as well pack up our uniforms, right, and go home. And so that was a really important element in that, yeah. And I think this one of the things is that one of the things that COVID has really brought home to us especially after George Floyd, was that because what you saw was movement in America, movement in Europe, movement in Africa, all across the Caribbean, all across Western, even Eastern Europe, yeah, as a result of the death of a black man in the United States of America. And so we saw that solidarity and the need for that solidarity. And so that solidarity is incredibly important. But it's sad that it takes, the death, and it always is the case, the death of a black man.
That's right.
To actually force us to do the things that we need to do. And in many ways, I think I said to a friend of mine this evening here that, when we look at COVID, I think the Creator works in very mysterious ways, yeah? Because in all those years, Ron, we would travel to America. I remember going to Arizona, Miami, travel over there to your conferences. You come here, yeah. But now, what COVID has forced us now to embrace technology now, that we can have this conversation, and we can have this conversation with brothers and sisters in the Caribbean and Africa, without any costs whatsoever. And those conversations are taking place, yeah.
Oh yeah.
So God works in very, very mysterious ways, and I think that we have to embrace this opportunity while we've got people's attention, and really try and push the agenda to the next level.
Yeah, and just on that, and the change, what Charles just said there in relation to COVID, Ronald, the conversation of race is something that is just endemic where America is concerned, to the most open way in a way. But as this George Floyd thing, like Charles has said, brought another level of discussion, or a kind of veracity of discussion. Just to think of the kind of, like, I suppose, the dynamite that is underneath George Floyd, in the way of, we mentioned Trump before. Do you know what I mean? So even with all of that just adds to that situation, especially with his reaction to it. But for you as an officer, has another type of conversation sparked?
Oh, it has. It has caused me to have a real in-depth conversation. I'm talking about taking deep dives in conversation about things. I can sit here and tell you that there's a couple of notions going on in this country, and hopefully in other places, because I think it should be part of the conversation. One of them is abolition. Should we abolish policing, period, and start all over again? Or should we reform? I can tell you that I'm opposed to reform, because reform hasn't worked. So what I'm talking about is restructuring and the evaluation and analysis of our criminal justice system, not just policing, but the system, to see whether or not it worked for people like me and Charles and the people we represent and the communities we come from. Because when you talk with people in America, they will tell you that policing has never worked for them. Well, and this was before Charles Floyd lost his life. This was before Rodney King lost his life in the early 70s. So, this conversation is one that we should have had and should have been having all along. Some of us has been having this conversation. When we met in Manchester, when we met in Toronto, these issues came up in the sessions that we were holding, and people mentioned this. They might not have mentioned it the way that we are talking about it now, but they're talking about it. And we're talking about it ourselves across our cell phones, texting, emails. We're talking about whether or not policing as a service, because that's exactly what it is. Does it answer our call? And I'm not talking about how quickly they get there. The question on the table is, what do they do when they get there for Black people in the communities that we come from? And so those are the heavy, real heavy conversations that we're having there. Let me just share this with you then, because I wanted to say this and then get Charles's reaction to it. A young lady in the media, she writes, put together an article, and the article talks about the failure of recruitment campaigns because hiring Black officers will not eliminate white racist systems. They will not straighten up Black racist systems. And you know what? I went back over all of the years that we've been working and talking about recruitment. And not that recruitment isn't a strategy, but it's not the solution, because we've been recruiting people of color into policing now for a long time. And what we have witnessed is that nothing has changed. What ultimately happens is that some people come in, end up being like Charles and I and others that I know, who don't fade in the face of racism and discrimination. And then the other group of those people who they're compromised, and then they for some reason or another, they join the other side. Now, and I can't, and I'm not saying that that's wrong or right. I'm just saying that's what happens. So part of the conversation now is, and I think it's one we should have, is whether or not we need to continue to promote a process by which we think renders some results when at the end of the day, the results is negative and nothing changes. So, it's like the definition of insanity. Keep doing the same thing over and over and expect different results. So I don't want to get hung up no more in all of that. But that's the kind of conversation we need to be having with ourselves, because we've done all of that. I remember, I forget what the name was in the UK, but they've had minority recruitment campaigns.
Yeah. Well, I would look at that akin to, for example, in the Caribbean and Africa in the sort of post-colonial period, where those countries obtained their independence from the European powers, and then you put in place your prime ministers and leaders that was trained, in Oxford and these institutions to maintain white supremacy. So it's not just a matter of personnel. It's a matter of the whole sort of structure, the whole sort of mindset, and the whole system of white supremacy that you have to attack. And I think it's a similar thing in policing. It's not just and Ron, you can put me right about this, but in 1990, when Rodney King was so brutally beaten by the police, I think the LAPD had quite a lot of Black officers.
Of course they did.
in the LAPD, but that didn't stop Rodney King being brutalized and everything that followed from that. Yeah, so it's got to be much more than just recruitment.
Yeah, there are things that we ought to be doing. There's no question about that, and we ought to be. If it works in the UK, if it works in Toronto, if it works in South Africa and the Caribbean, then we ought to look at it, and we can make adjustments. We can tinker around the edges of it, because maybe we can use it. But the real question at the end of the day is, to what extent were we able to change the white racist supremacist system structure that exists in terms of what's going on in this country? And that I want to be brutally honest. We've done a whole lot of that, and we haven't changed anything because our success has been superficial at best. And it's not because we didn't work hard. It was superficial at best, but the same racist system exists today that's producing the individual that stood on George Floyd's neck until he died.
When you talk about examples, and everything that you said there, you both obviously with the years of experience must have some idea of where the change needs to happen. And you talked about going over to other countries, getting best practice and stuff. Ron, where in America, and the same with you, Charles, if there's any forces over here that are setting a good example
to be perfect. Oh, sorry, I'll let Ron go.
There are some examples, and there are some examples in relationship to efforts that have been around and also being tried. And what I think we need to do is be supportive of those efforts. But the real success is going to be when we go to our community and talk about this thing in the kind of way about whether or not it's meeting the demands of the community. I have a whole bunch of stories about things that I was doing when I was walking the foot beat as a police officer, but I was always in touch with the people that I worked with. And when I had a chance to serve them directly, I would talk to them about what they wanted, because I wasn't there working for myself. Yeah, I was getting paid, but I was there working for them in an attempt to identify justice. And the thing that Charles talked about, this repertoire, I can't.
Reparative justice, yeah.
Yeah, preparative justice, and that was foremost in my mind. So when I had an opportunity to say that, I remember one time when I was involved in a situation, rather than lock a guy up, I got him a job, because locking him up wasn't going to solve the problem. And not that I was going to lock him up in the beginning, but I had the conversation with the woman who automobile he took the battery out of, but he ultimately put it back. But we don't have that conversation right now. And you talk to the police officers in this country and everywhere else, they swear they're working on behalf of the citizens, but they don't even talk to the citizens. So how can you work for me when you don't talk to me?
So where you were working on, was it a predominantly black force?
Oh no. When I joined the force, about 19% of the Washington Metropolitan Police Force was black. And
so just working in the way that you just explained there, which, I mean, for me, kind of like touches my heart. That's the human person that I like to see behind the uniform. But it shouldn't. I mean, it should, I should say. But I do know some people, and I've worked with. There's one police officer who comes to mind, and he was a really good guy, genuine guy. I mean, initially when I met him, there was a bit of friction because he thought I had a chip on my shoulder, but we got on. But he was fair. Yeah, he was fair. And so listening to you and that approach there, it's that people should be patting you on the back. Well done, Ron. We need more like you. But I know that's not the case.
Well, there was, to some extent, there was the personal satisfaction that I could see in the lady's face. And I still know this guy who I got a job.
I mean from fellow officers.
Oh, no, not from fellow officers. Now, there were some officers who felt like that. But look, they're not going to get it because, and I think Charles would agree, they're not going to get it because the training that they go through reconditions them to what it is that the institution wants them to do. And so they're not going to slap me on the back if I commit an act that seems counteractive or counterproductive, rather, to the values of the institution. That wasn't the way generally police behave. But you know what you need to do, though.
Yeah.
You know, the reality, and I come back to your question about good practice. Yeah, the reality is this: is that if you're looking for good practice, and this isn't self-serving, but the only group of people that I know within policing, whether it's in North America or Europe, that are focused on the types of restructuring and reform, or whatever term you want to use, the only place that's coming from is from within black police organizations. Yeah,
that's right.
And therefore, I will say this is that if there's going to be a sort of the moral and philosophical framework for restructuring, that there is a necessity for the Black Police Association, yeah. And when I say the Black Police Association, I mean the moral and philosophical essence of it. That has to be embraced. that it's essential that that's embraced. And so when you listen to a Ron, and you listen to Ron mentioned Leroy Logan, that was in the red, black, and blue. When you listen to Leroy, you listen to Bevan Powell and those and Paul Wilson and many of Ron's colleagues, yeah, that were the foundation of this movement. When you listen to these guys, what you're listening to is not just individuals, but you're listening to is a theory that's evolving about how we should do things. But nobody's interested in this because it's white supremacy that we're dealing with right now.
That's
you
right.
see? And that's what we need. And until I think potentially the death of George Floyd potentially could have got us past all of that. Yeah. But if I'm honest with you, many of our own politicians are so wrapped up in party politics,
right?
Yeah, that they cannot even see, where the solutions are going to come from. Yes, we can pass legislation. That's legislation is perfectly fine, yeah. But there's something about the work that people like Ron and others have laid down, yeah, that needs to be understood on a whole different level. Yeah, and that's what we need to see birthing now.
Charles, let me say this. It has already happened in America this election cycle. And let me tell you what it is. Black Lives Matter has a slogan, and their slogan is defund the police. Now, I don't know what defund the police mean, but after either the election was over, there were white men and women who claim that the slogan defund the police hurt the Democrat and those individuals who were supportive of the Black Lives Matter movement. And so there are people who are saying that maybe that they should have rethought that process and don't use those slogans. Now, I had a conversation with a friend of mine who teaches at Harvard. And he's at the Hamilton Houston Institute for Race and Justice, and David, he was on the call.
Oh yeah. He did the paper about we need a justice system. Yeah,
that's right. So I had this conversation with him, and I said, look, can you believe that there are people who are telling Black Lives Matter that they need to change their slogan? Come on, man. Change the slogan for what? But there are people, there's a young woman who came from, I believe, St. Louis, whose slogan was not only Black Lives Matter, but defund the police, and she won. So how can you tell me what it is that I want to run, or you're going to tell me that that's not a legitimate issue in our community? Of course it is.
Yeah. Of course,
But it offended. Of course it offended some white people and police lovers. Of course it did. But it was it's supposed to offend them because it offended me.
Okay.
It offends me.
We're going to touch on that again. We're just going to go for a break and we'll be right back. See you in a bit.
Feel the vibe on Legacy.
Well, when we come back, we'll touch on that a bit more, on that defund the police, because I think with that, sometimes people people don't want to do their own research. Yeah, sometimes people don't want to do their own thinking. So when you say something like defund the police, people think you're just saying get rid of the police. It's no money. I mean, there's a lot of us who don't have an understanding of police budgets and how much they actually get and what some of those budgets are supposed to actually do within some of the communities which the police is in. And for me, this is another part of empowering the community to know what they should know, what they're entitled to know. And very much what you were saying before, Ron, about how you go out there and you say what you want us to do. You kind of find that these things probably do happen here, but usually has a reaction to something else.
Yeah.
when you know, when, and then it's the same. Then really, it's the wheel. It's that wheel, isn't it? It's that same wheel.
Absolutely.
So you build a relationship. So you may have a superintendent for the area here. You build a relationship with them, and then usually, it'd be an interesting research paper, Charles, to see how many superintendents from this area where they went to afterwards. If any of them stayed on the same level or got promoted, and I'm sure you'll find that most were promoted. And as you said before, it's not just in the area of policing, most inner city areas.
I have a question. How many black chief constables do you all have in the country now? Because I remember when the first one got the job down in Kent. So how many do you have now?
0.
Oh, man.
You know, going backwards.
who was the one, Charles?
Hey, it was Mike Fuller.
Mike Fuller.
Yeah,
Mike Fuller was the first and now the only black chief constable in the UK. He was the chief of Kent. He was the chief.
He wrote this book here, yeah?
That's his book?
Yeah.
You over kill the black one.
Kill the black one.
Was he an activist?
No.
So why is he writing that book?
He was. It's interesting, you see. Well, I have a whole thing, but I don't want to get into this tonight. About people.
You know, you have to be around to understand it. But it's complex. It really truly is. I mean, you know, and we have 100 Mike Fullers in the U.S. And you know, it's like they go somewhere. It's like they grow them somewhere.
Right, we're coming back, guys.
90.1.
Yes, and welcome back. And you're in tune to the search engine with Anthony. Currently talking to Ronald E. Hampton, joining us from Washington, D.C., and also Charles Crichlow, our very own here from the UK. Both retired police officers, both have served over 60 years in the police force, both very active within their own communities, both of the same thought that the police are there to serve by consent, and also about empowering the communities to hold police to account, scrutinize, be a part of the community, not saying don't be there. We don't want no police, but it has to be amicable how things work together. Now, before we went to the break, you talked a bit about defund the police, Ronald, and I wanted to just clarify that in the sense that sometimes people might believe that when you say that, it's like get rid of the police. And I think a big part for us as lay people in most areas, we're always running to other people to get to say, the kind of train you don't know. If it's about law, you've got to go to a lawyer. So, there's no way, because you haven't been trained, you can't go and learn that for yourself. So the same thing in relation to law or the police. A lot of us are not aware of how much just going and putting petrol in our cars and buying food and the taxes that we're paying there is our money that's paying for the police, and there's rules of regulations in which they are supposed to go under. So when you're talking about defund the police, did they get sections of funding?
Well, when you say here in this country, and I'm pretty sure it's everywhere else, that the police as an agency of government gets that they get money, and it comes in a budget form, and then their budget is divided up in the services that they provide. Salaries and benefits are probably the largest component of any budget. So if say for example, if the Manchester Police Department budget is say 80 billion pounds, and they got 2,500 officers, the majority of their budget is going to be payroll and benefits for those people that work there. but there's also other parts of their budget that they have to deal with as it relates to service in the public. And that's what Black Lives Matter, and that's what even people like me are raising. Defund means to evaluate and analyze whether or not the money that is invested in budgets and police department translate into the proper and effective delivery of services for the people that they serve. In other words, and I was just talking about this the other day. If my sink is leaking, and I call a plumber, and the plumber come and leave, and I pay him, and my sink is still leaking, then he hasn't earned the money that I paid him. So I'm going to call him back, because people don't pay for something that they don't get. And when you talk with people in our community, in the Black community, and I don't care where the Black community is, there's a question about not only the quality of police service, but whether or not it's the effective response that our community deserves. And that's all we're talking about when we say defund, because the money that has gone there has gone to pay for the services that they're providing. And so every now and then we need to look at and analyze whether or not it's effective. And are the citizens that they serve getting the quality of service that they're entitled to? And that's all we're really talking about. And I think that's a legitimate conversation.
And you said before, both of you said about the system, whether, you both talked about regulation, and there's enough regulation and enough paper there. If people were to really follow that things would be fine. So it goes much deeper than that. It is definitely about the individual and questioning, I suppose, why you took this role in the first place, or whether you shut your eyes when you were reading or listening to the oath before it was before you became or got, I don't know what you call it, passed out to become a police officer.
Yeah.
I think that just on the defund police question, is similar to Ron, is that it's a serious question about what are we paying for, yeah? And the problem is in this country I can speak of, is that this and in my manifesto, the very first point in the manifesto is about transparency, about radical transparency, which is that in this country, the average listener to this program now will know very little about how strategic decisions are taken, how the money is, how the council tax is spent, what it's spent on. We have very little oversight of how police take decisions, and whether, especially when it comes to spending. And so if we were able to see, if we had transparency on a lot of that stuff, yeah, then we would be able to hold the police accountable more properly.
Right.
And you see, so I think transparency and accountability go hand in hand, because it's very difficult to hold the police to account in certain ways, yeah, when you don't actually have the information at hand. And so for me, the very first thing that needs to happen is that we need a radical amount of transparency. The majority of police sort of behavior at strategic level, we like to wrap things up in this whole thing of secrecy and stuff like that. But actually, there's a whole lot of that stuff that can quite easily be placed in the public domain. And I'll give you an example.
Give us a few, please.
Give me an example here. In the George Floyd murder, lynching, what was it that brought about a level of accountability? How did we get to? How did the whole world get to?
Good question.
To move as a result of that? You know what? It's the smartphone, yeah. It's the camera.
Right.
That's what brought about a level of accountability there, yeah. And if you look across a number of other similar things, it's the smartphones, yeah, that's actually putting a check on police behavior on the street. Okay. Now, my argument is this: is that we're getting beaten up in the boardroom, and that's where we need to put the cameras.
That's right.
So, yeah. So what I'm saying to you is that I've identified a number of areas where, when, for example, let's take the every other year, Greater Manchester Police will have to produce an equality, diversity, and human rights strategy. So that will be a series of board meetings where some members of the public are, supposed to be engaged in that. Yeah. Now, for me, why can't those meetings be held in the public domain? Why can't the public be able to see those types of board meetings? Because there's nothing about that that's confidential or secret, and that's just one example. So if you were able to see how those strategies, arrived at, then I think that it would be quite an eye-opening experience, yeah. But actually, what it would do, it would bring about, you would start to see behavior changing, just like when
that's right.
Before the House of Commons,
Cameras.
there was a time when the public weren't deemed fit enough to be able to see what goes on in the House of Commons.
Right.
Yeah? And there were all sorts of arguments as to why we, the public, were not mature enough to see what's going on in the House of. It's hard for people to believe that now.
Right.
But now it's something that that we expected, and I think there's a lot of research that's shown that the behavior of members of Parliament have changed significantly. Right. As a result of cameras being placed in the House of Commons.
I would just say, Charles, I totally agree in that one of the things that cameras have done is that they have exposed the situations that have taken place that we wouldn't have known anything about if it hadn't been for the camera. If the person on the balcony of the apartment building wouldn't have captured Rodney King, we wouldn't have never known that Rodney King was beaten the way he was, and that they stood around and cheered Coombs, the sergeant who was part of that, cheered them on rather than to stop them and take control of the situation. And there's nothing about policing that's a secret. As a matter of fact, if we would do just a couple of simple things, we would have more community support. For example, if the public was aware of how officers are deployed in our community. Now, why would that be a secret when I should know or have information about how officers are assigned in my community? Because that has to do with the perception, and I say this word, and I say it this way for a reason. It has to do with the perception of public safety. Because if we know that they're supposed to be in our neighborhood, then we're going to look for them. But if we don't know where they are in our neighborhood, then we can't look for them because we don't know where they are. But then we have somebody telling us.
Ron, when you say how they are assigned in the community, what do you mean? Because when you say that, when I think about a police sign, I just think that's your beat. You're there from 10 until.
That's what I'm talking about. There's nothing secret about that. If the police department were to say that and we know the information, for example, in America, because the districts, like we have 7 police districts in Washington, D.C., and each district has a certain amount of what they call a patrol service area. They call it a patrol service area. I happen to live in patrol service area 04. Well, if I look on a map, then I can even tell you what the boundaries of my patrol service area are. But I don't know who or how many officers are assigned to my service area. But it's not a secret, and I shouldn't be prevented from knowing who those officers are. If anything, me knowing who those officers are make it even more important that I have some contact with them when it comes to being able to share with them what it is that's going on in our area. None of those officers live in. None of the officers that service this area live in this area. And most of the police officers who work in Washington, D.C. live in Maryland and Virginia to start off with. Probably close to 80% of them. They don't live in D.C. for a variety of reasons. But because of that, there's nothing secret about our community knowing who the persons are. When I was a police officer and I had a beat, and I had a particular beat for about 5 or 6 years, I actually knocked on the doors of the people of the community that I worked in and introduced myself and told them who I was and asked them if they had something that they wanted to share with me. And I'm not talking about what's going on in the neighborhood. I'm talking about in terms of what in their mind was public safety. Because a safe community means a different thing to different people. But you have to be in touch with the people in the community. And so I'm walking the foot beat. I need to know the people in my community like they need to know me. So I think that should be the case across the board. There's no reason why that wouldn't be the case anywhere we have police officers. If I read, if I'm familiar with history as I am, how the Met started off with this myth about Sir Robert Peel and his appeal in the community that he lived in. There was a time when the police in the UK offered housing to their police officers so they could live in the communities that they worked in. That's a good idea. That's a good idea. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
that's right. Yeah. If you, I mean, officers generally that live within certain communities, they tend to approach police in a more considered way. Yeah, because
that's right.
You know, I mean, take me for example. You know, I pretty much a community person, and you know, that being said, you know, you're going to think very carefully about how you handle people.
That's right.
You know, so if you know, there's something about if you're, you know, integral in the community, that when there's grief, you know, if you mourn with people, you celebrate with people, you know, you learn with people. When you're entrenched in the community in that way, yeah, you have a vested interest, and your children.
That's right.
You know? One of the things that, I mean, you might not know this. I've still got a photograph of it. When we marched through Mossad in 2006, right? I mean, I was the coordinator for that march, yeah. And one of the things that I did was that my children, well, I had one older daughter at the time. She would have been about 7 years old. And she walked at the front of that march. Now, you don't put your family, and my wife was there, you don't put your family in a situation that you're not comfortable with.
Right.
Now, I love my children. I love my family. But I love my community. And therefore, I was confident.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, but folks, there are folks that would not even park their vehicle in our community.
That's right.
Because they live in fear.
There was, and I can tell you this, there were some things that we were able to do in Manchester when we was having a conference because they knew Charles. Now, and I'm not blowing them up or patting them on the back. I'm telling you like it is and was. When I said I know Charles Crichlow,
Crichlow.
I'm sorry. Look,
Right.
when I said that, they opened up the place for us, the community center. There were things that we did in that city, that in that community, that because of Charles we was able to do. And that's the way you police. That's the way you get things done, because you are a part of that community. Black police officers have had that experience. And look, when I was in I remember the first time I came over there when I met Wilson.
Mhm.
There were people who knew Wilson, Paul Wilson.
That's right.
Because he was the kind of person that he was. There were people there who, when I would come over, who knew David McFarland, and
Dave, yes, great guy.
everything would open up. Everything would open up. It was as if that Moses was parting the sea, because these brothers had the kind of connection in the community. And I always would tell my colleagues that you can sit in their meetings and listen to brothers and sisters talk about how they're connected to their community. But the real test is that when you go to a city where a brother and sister is from, and you ask some people in that city, do they know that brother or sister? And if the brother or sister is really working in that city, then things will happen because they are working in that city. But sometimes we have a tendency to run our mouth and overload our hind parts, and we ain't doing what we said we're doing. But them brothers, people like Charles, people like David, people like Leroy and them, people knew them. When we came over there and we talked to them, things would happen because these brothers had laid the groundwork of working in those communities, and they knew what was happening. What was his name? The brother that was from he worked in the training division in the city where Nottingham. I can't even think of his name.
Oh, Tony Smichael.
Tony Smichael.
Yeah.
They knew Tony Smichael. I'm telling you, man, this is fantastic. I just got through getting an email from David Mitchell in Canada.
Yeah.
And when we was in Canada, Charles, I would go around Toronto and talk to people. All you had to do was mention David Mitchell's name and the city would open up. That's
right.
That's what this thing about Black police officers and working in the community, they know and understand because they're in the community. That's right. You ask some of them white police officers about that, they don't want to have nothing to do with the community. And they don't know people in the community.
I've got a question on that. I've got one question. I mean, it's just more of a statement. It just says there are quite a few auditors in America, Canada and England who are filming the police, and it's legal. It saved a lot of people from being harmed, shot, illegally arrested, and given illegal traffic stop tickets. Even when the police are taken to court, they lose because of camera evidence or cams in their cars.
Yeah, in terms of accountability, the camera has launched a accountability effort that can't be matched. Because the police aren't holding themselves accountable, but those cameras are holding them accountable. You better believe it.
And just with what you were talking with regard to the how it is, and when you do get a police officer that's within their own community and they're obviously being themselves, they are a lot of, I can't speak obviously but I do know a few who have actually requested not to work in their own communities for the other side of things, that they think that they would be ridiculed or seen as a coconut or whatever.
Well, that's true, but my take on that is that the public understands that we all have to have a job. And if you work and do what you do with the level of integrity, the level of honesty and forthrightness that we work with, then you don't have anything to work. You don't have anything to work with. Look, I didn't take. There were coffee shops on my beat. I didn't take a cup of coffee. If I did, I paid for it because I know that sometimes those kind of things can be an issue. But I lived on my foot beat. The foot beat I had was 16th Street to 18th Street, Columbia Road, Harvard Street to Calorama Road. I lived at 1673 Columbia Road. This is the Adams Morgan part of Washington, D.C. And I lived there for a long time and moved to where I live now on Allison Street. I lived on and the people that I worked with and on my footbeat knew that I lived in my community. They knew where I lived. I didn't have any issues because I was straightforward with them and a person of integrity. I didn't have any problems. And so that storyline is something that I say the white boys created because they didn't want to live in the city in the first place. Not in the black part of the city anyhow. They to live in the suburbs and all of that other stuff. But that wasn't, I never lived in the suburbs because I couldn't afford to live in the suburbs. So I lived in the city along with everybody else. That's why I went to school here in the city. So this is where I wanted to be. And I wasn't afraid of anybody. Come on now, why would I be afraid of people who look like me? I wasn't afraid of nobody. And people knew that I was a police officer. I didn't have any issues. And that's what I noticed when I was in the UK, and I noticed it when I was in Canada. You can be a police officer and you can live in the community, and you just need to be straightforward and have integrity and be honest. And it's going to work out. Nothing is going to happen.
I agree with that 100%. I think if you watch the program on Sunday with Leroy Logan, Red, Black, and Blue, I think that was dramatized, and I think you will get some negativity.
Yeah, of course.
But as Ron correctly said, that you have to have faith and you have to have integrity about you. And if you don't have integrity, you will have problems.
Yeah, that's right.
There's
Okay, guys.
There's no two ways about it. Yeah.
All right, we're going to be right back.
Feel the vibe on Legacy.
This is a reminder.
Yeah, guys. So just going through the break. When we come back, I'd like to go into some of what you said with these things here, Charles. Just a bit more with the taser. Just home in on that. But the thing I'd like to ask as well is about giving the community some information of how they can empower themselves, especially around the issues of. We've got the talk at the moment about police officers in schools. I mean, I know this has been a situation in some parts of America for quite a while. So I'd like to get some feedback from you on that, Ron, and what you see the benefits or not for that. Also, Charles, just while we're in the advert, you talked before about the transparency and getting the cameras into boardrooms, and you said, Ron, that there's nothing really that's taking place that should be so secret. One, Charles, these meetings that take place that are not being filmed at the moment, are the minutes of those meetings available to the public?
Not that I'm aware of. I think, you've got the Freedom of Information Act, but the thing is, you don't. It's like trying to find a needle in a haystack. You don't know what you don't know.
That's right.
But I think a lot of this stuff, the police will be able to, to hide behind a cloak of confidentiality and things of that nature. But there will be. I can't really pick any particular. There's just a raft of areas. Of everyday things. even things that, as I mentioned, like procurement, yeah, for example, you know, the police will spend money on catering and, you know, and consultancy services and stuff like that. How many black people, you know, receive contracts from the police? Because the police is a big spender.
Right.
You know,
That's right. That's
and
right.
and you know, I mean, we haven't talked about economic justice, which is slightly to the side of this conversation. But personally, I don't think that you can really have a conversation about criminal justice or justice without actually talking about economic justice.
True.
You know, I think those things go very much hand in hand, and we're going to see a lot of that now with you know, in the next couple of years when the cuts and austerity starts to kick in and affect our community.
Right.
Because one of the
Right.
biggest drivers of crime, is said to be inequality, not
That's
necessarily poverty, but inequality.
Inequality. That's right.
And so the issue about economic justice, I think this is where people like us who have got that experience within the policing realm should really always work with other activists who campaign on other issues. So we've got a holistic struggle, if you like, here.
Okay. And welcome back. And you're in tune to the search engine with Anthony. And we are at the moment talking with Ronald E. Hampton and Charles Crichlow, both retired police officers, sharing their views and opening our eyes to the inner workings of the policing system and their experiences, and empowering you, and you know what things you have a right to know, how to, you know, make policing in your community better, how to make yourself feel safe, and set a platform for the future for your children, and to change their view of police and in police enforcement, and know that it is in your power as a community to do that, and it's your right.
Yeah.
So again, as I said to you before, just in the break, one of the things that's very new, especially to Manchester, in a way that the mayor of Manchester has given his thumbs up for police to be in schools. So first of all, could you, Ron, just give us, because there's been some horrific videos that have been going around with reactions to policing in schools, and I mean, there's so much, I suppose, about America that's quite scary, just for the fact that he's carrying a gun. Do you know what I mean? And when that any situation of aggression or violence is going to switch from, you know, just moving somebody from one place to the other, to you becoming fearful and having to reach for your pistol. So what is there's some places that have stopped it. There's now. They said no more, but
they have. There's been a movement now. Probably the movement itself is probably about a couple of years old, to really take police officers out of schools, because they're looking at the impact of police officers in schools, and a couple of things have happened. School administrators have used the police to criminalize youth. There's also a parallel movement in this country that talks about the school to the prison pipeline. School to prison pipeline, and that school to prison pipeline is primarily and almost 100% black. White kids don't get caught up in the school to prison pipeline. Black kids do. There have been situations where 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old girls and boys have been put in handcuffs by big burly police officers and taken off to the police precinct. So all of that has led to
from school to the police station.
That's exactly right, from school to the police station. And the only thing that these students were guilty of, or these individuals were guilty of, was sometimes tantrums. Nothing that's criminal. There's nothing criminal about a child 8, 9, 10 years old having a tantrum. That's part of being a child. So that the criminalizing has really just created a real pushback and a backlash. And part of that backlash and pushback now is to get police officers out of schools. And it's a move that's gaining in terms of what's going on in this country.
Mm-hmm.
And one that I have to say that I agree with, because I've seen the devastating impact of administrators, school administrators utilizing police to criminalize behavior. And not that the action or the thing that a student did was criminal, but they criminalized the behavior. And so then when a 7-year-old black child throws a tantrum, they call the police, put handcuffs on them, and take them to the police station. When a 7-year-old white child throws a tantrum, they tell them to go stand in the corner and have time out. So it's not handled the same. So there's a situation that is now existing. And so there's a move to take police officers out of school. And I have to agree with it. Having been a police, having seen how it happens and how black children get wrapped up in this system and unintentionally. So it's a movement. And police don't make, and I tell folks all the time, if you believe that having the police in the school make the school safe, then there's something wrong with you, because that's not true. What makes the school safe is when the individuals that go to that school have conversations with themselves about what makes the school safe. You know, just simply having a police officer in the neighborhood or in your community don't make the community safe. What makes the community safe is that when people work together to identify what it is that they want to make them have safe. But simply having a police officer don't make your community safe. And that's the reality. So you know, for every action, there's a reaction. And so now, but I've also heard from individuals inside the police departments who have that job, and some who had the job, and they didn't necessarily like the idea of working in schools either. So there's some feelings and expressions on both sides, because we have had projects where individuals who work. We have a program here in the city called Roving Leaders. It's a Roving Leader program, individuals who work in the community, in public housing, and they know these young people. They work in the rec center, and they know these young people. Once upon a time, they worked in the schools, and then all of a sudden, they took them out of the schools. Something like that, I'm in support of, because I've seen the evidence of it in terms of how it impacts. Because if you work in the schools and work in the community, then you know these kids, and then you're better able to gain their confidence and their respect, because you respect them. See, nobody's going to respect you if you don't respect them. So there's a movement on that way, and that's where we are. And there's going to be some changes. There's really are, and that's not a bad thing.
Charles?
I think that police officers in schools is a complete failure of imagination. And let me say this, and this is under a Labour administration here in Manchester, is that a Labour mayor is okay to commit public money to put police officers in schools. But this is the same Labour administration that were okay to defund youth workers.
Oh, man.
Yeah. Now, you see, defunding the police. But nobody said anything when we defunded youth workers or youth services right here in Manchester. So what is it about youth workers that is okay to say, well, we don't need that? I mean, what can be more important than the development of our young people within our communities?
Right.
And you see, so I think that paying for police officers to be in schools, they could have funded probably twice the number of youth workers, yeah, for for a fraction of the money that they spend on putting police officers in school. So I just think it's an utter failure of imagination.
Okay, but some will say, and this is the point that the mayor of Manchester is doing. He's talking about the police on a crime prevention basis. Yeah, they're talking about knife crime. So, and I would say this is probably a call from teachers or some teachers themselves who are saying that they can't teach certain lessons because there's other pupils in there and they're not there to deal with the behaviors of
So
some.
why is the police the answer?
That's right. That's exactly right.
Why is that automatically the answer? I can tell you lots of places, even in corporate life, right, where there's a lot of disruptive behavior, but the automatic answer is not bring the police here.
Hey, look, there's some destructive behavior in the police department, and they don't get rid of the police officers who participate in it. So come on now, let's be real.
Yeah.
What needs to happen is a real conversation about what it is that's going on. See, one of the things that happened here, and I think it's universal. See, people have been fed and conditioned to believe that the police are the answer to the problem. And
Correct.
The police are not the answer to the problem. In order to gain and identify the answer to the problem, you need to sit down and have a conversation. And see, they don't want to have a conversation. They want to go immediately to the police and let the police handle it. Well, the police don't even know the answer. And most of the time, they don't know the problem because they are not invested in it in that sense. So the people in the school need to talk about what is it that happens in this school that makes you feel safe or unsafe. And then let's talk about what we need to do to address what those issues are. But to automatically say that the solution to the problem is that we need to have police in the school is ludicrous. Yeah, because the police don't know what to do. Yeah, and they're not going to gain the confidence and trust of the young people or anybody else in the building if they are seen as simply being there to somehow or another control behavior and discipline, because that's not what they're there to do.
Got a message that's coming that says, I think an answer to yours, Charles. Youth work is from our Angeli. Youth work is not seen as a professional vocation anymore.
Well, I think that that's part of the problem. I think that people who work with our young people, youth workers, especially Black youth workers in our community, really should have, in my opinion, should have the highest status within our young people, because it's so it's so easy to identify all the problems that we have with young people. But then the only solution that we can put on the table is policing. I mean, this it's just ridiculous. So that's a political issue. That's a clear choice of where taxpayers' pounds and dollars are spent, and that brings us on to another problem about proper political representation in our community. And I mean, certainly here in South Manchester, we don't have proper and that's problematic.
You cut out then a bit, Charles. You said we here in Manchester we don't have proper. Oh, then you cut out. So could you repeat that? You said we didn't. You kind of lost you then.
There's a noise on the line.
You said here in Manchester.
Yeah, my point really was around, was segueing into the issue of Black political representation, which I think is a real problem in our community, because these issues about where money is spent and choices that have to be made, these issues require that people are in the council, in the local authority, or that are people in the ears of the mayor saying, this is what we want,
You've gone again. Don't know if you're being sabotaged there, Charles.
Hey?
Don't know if you're being sabotaged there. You keep going and coming. But I get your point that you're making. But again, the point that Anthony made is it's so sad. I remember. I don't know what it says about us as a community, because I know so many, when we did have the qualification for a youth and community worker, it was a very, very popular course, and you had a lot of young people that were going on that and coming out and going into the youth clubs and wanting to do that work, and the qualification, I believe, was very, very helpful in helping young people. Lifelong learning, I think, was the term that was very much used in the training of those times. So to go, like you said, to want to put police in school when you know the benefit of what building a relationship with somebody within your own community can do, especially around, home and school. I mean, we've got these academies at the moment that, in a way, sometimes some of them seem like you can't get past the door. It seems like they don't want to be a part of the community.
Absolutely.
Whatever you do, if you're working with young people, you have to develop a relationship, and it's not going to be overnight, and you don't want it to be. The success is in the building of the relationship and gaining trust and confidence of the young people in relationship to what it is. But the other important component is to listen to what it is that they have to say, because they know exactly what it is that's going on, and they will offer the solutions to it. And they need to be at the table and involved in that process. If they're not, then we're shortchanging ourselves and not giving them any credit for them being able to understand what the situations are that they're in.
Yeah. And oftentimes young people, when you talked about behaviors before around in the school environment, oftentimes young people are experiencing, traumas and things of that nature based on experiences that they've had in the community, even sometimes at the hands of police officers. Yeah. And therefore, the police are completely inappropriate to be a part of the solution concept in that environment. So I really do think that that money could be far better spent in areas that can really help, that are more developmental rather than policing.
Right.
Definitely. I mean, even with the states, and I don't know if it is now, the case in your schools and things. I mean, I know when we watch these TV shows, it kind of like schools. Some schools of having counselors in the school, based in the school, like it's a standard thing. Just like you go for your health MOT every year or whatever.
We do. Now part of the regular administration of a school, we have social workers. We also have psychiatrists. We have psychologists. We have counselors who are in the schools working with our young people. And all of these numbers are supposedly, or the assignment of these individuals in our school are based on the number of students that are attending the school. There's a relationship, they say between, if we have 400 students, then we need to have 200, we need to have 2 social workers, we need to have 1 psychiatrist, we need to have 1 psychologist. And all of that's good. And the success or not of handling those situations are also going to be based on the people's ability to build relationship with those students. It's just not going to happen because you have 2 social workers, a psychologist and a psychiatrist. It's just not going to happen because they happen to be there. And that's why what we have witnessed in some of our schools in the city attempts to bring in individuals, what we call, like I was talking about earlier, these roving leaders are individuals who work in the community. They work in rec centers. They work in the schools. They have a relationship with these kids. They coach sports teams and all of that. and they are with these young people an awful lot of their school time and out of school time, and it really makes a difference in their ability to assist these young people and answer the questions that they have, because they know what's going on. I mean, you cannot. There's no more. They don't know what's happening. They know exactly what's happening.
Let me just read this. Still having a question again. Let me just read it. He said, "Yes, I believe BLM was pushed by the political media to distract us from realities, to preoccupy us from a truth in plain sight. How many centuries they have been killing the melanin man? Like the brother said, they get the funding to push their tyranny." Can I just again? I mean, wow, time's just gone. Do you know what? I doing some research here. Let me just show you. This is my questions. Yeah, that I had for you guys. Yeah, and I haven't read the one. Yeah, I'm telling you, how many questions have I got on there?
Wow. Did you get to ask any?
It's coming to the conversation. 37 questions I've got there. But what I want to touch on now is this proportionality. Yeah, because this is another area with the police, and we can wrap with stop and search in that as well. The argument that was pushed this week over here, Ron, with what position is Cressida?
She's the commissioner of the Metropolitan Police in London, yeah.
Okay, but she was talking about stop and search. It's a big issue in the mainstream media at the moment, especially on some of these mainstream radio shows. And what they're saying is, don't be shouting about the disproportionality of stop and search. If crime is in an area and the area is a predominantly black area and the crime is being committed by predominantly black people, then they're the ones that the police are going to go to in a prevention measure.
Mm-hmm. I've heard that because they've used that rationale in the States, and it don't carry water, because the results themselves, and they're the ones that produce the results. And some of the results look like there's a justification, for example, for what they call gun squads, where people, police officers go out and they stop people and take guns off of them. Well, somebody conducted a research piece. Out of 1,000 stops that they conducted, they got 4 guns. Now, the impact of the 1,000 stops, the 996 stops, is devastating because they did it all in the black community now, because they used that same phenomenon that's where the crime was. But the devastating impact of the 996 stops is going to and have conditioned the black community that they don't trust or want to be involved with the police. So the cost of it far outweighs any benefits that they think they're going to get from it. And plus, the stops don't realize anything. And we've had and seen research on that too. So this whole idea that simply because a community is black, they have crime there, and so you're going to send the police there to stop people and all that kind of stuff. Well, you need to lift up the top and peel it back and look at what are the societal issues that exist in that community, and then begin to start addressing them. I bet you, and I'm not even there, and I bet you that unemployment is one of them. I bet poor schools is one of them. Lack of adequate housing is one of them. I mean, just a variety of social issues that have not been addressed by that society as well as our society, because those are the same mirror issues that we're having here. And it ain't about the crime, because I think Charles mentioned something about it earlier, that if you're going to have people who don't have anything to eat, they're going to find a way to get something to eat. So let's not kid ourselves. And the police don't get people jobs. The police don't find housing for people. The police aren't involved in helping us get our children in schools or build in school buildings. So what we need is for our society to step up and do the things that need to take care of the social systemic issues in our society, and then also ultimately deal with the systemic racism that exists in our society when it comes to that. Black people aren't naturally or fundamentally criminals, and so we need to stop talking about it in that way.
Absolutely. I have a slightly well, not different take, but my take on this statement by Cressida Dick, the Commissioner of Metropolitan Police. It was something else that she said in this statement that caught my eye. Yeah? And she said that basically young black people are being stirred up by videos of events in America, and it's creating problems here. Yeah. So what she's trying to do there, yeah, she's trying to create a narrative that says that seeing these videos are a problem. And why I find that interesting, I don't know if you've followed this, Ron and Anthony, but a few weeks ago, a black musician in France, yeah, was beaten mercilessly by 4 police officers. And these officers were suspended, and I believe that there's a big investigation going on and so on, yeah? But what is interesting is that the political response to that, yeah, was that Emmanuel Macron, his government introduced a bill, or attempted to introduce a law that says that you're going to restrict people from videoing police officers and circulating those videos. Yeah,
yeah, I remember that.
This is the French government interior minister attempting to do this, and that caused a massive set of demonstrations in France, all over France. Yeah, and the government have actually withdrawn.
Yeah, they've withdrawn now, haven't they?
They've withdrawn that piece of that proposal. Yeah. But you see, but that gives you an indication, yeah, as to where the thinking is going. You see, and so when Cressida Dick, when she's making that type of statement, yeah, when saying that these videos are stirring up the minds of young people, that's exactly where her thinking is going. You see, and I say that campaigners and activists have to be very, very vigilant as to where the politics are going here in Europe.
And we'll be right back.
Feel the vibe on Legacy.
This is a
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I've seen that those things over there. We've literally, this is 2 minutes, and when we come back, we've literally got 10 minutes to go. I just really wanted to, when we come back, is to say something about Ron with touch on the schools and stuff. But again, and with the disproportionality, he talks about the schools to prison pipeline. And I wanted you to say a bit about actually how we make this change with this disproportionality. What kind of training is taking place? Charles can probably touch on it as well, in the sense of what kind of training goes on in the police force, in how you work with black communities, how you work with black students. The disproportionality is more towards black males, and this is going to all services, whether it's social services, youth offending services, and what's not there, or why there's a fear of that. I do know in America, here, I don't think we have one black college at all, do we? There's not any, is there?
No, we don't have historically black colleges as we have in America.
Yeah. So there's really no major platform, even though we know that so many of these young people are going to these, where it's from, do you call them charter schools? What we call like behavior schools here? No, charter schools are just like schools for. Sorry, I think I've blocked you. Sorry, Ron. Sorry, Ron. Go ahead.
I was just saying the charter schools are a different system that was brought on to somehow or another compete with the public school system, and they aren't doing any better job in terms of educating young people than the public schools. But the whole idea was to siphon monies, the basic foundation of monies from the public school system to this charter school system, which supposedly is public, but they can do any and everything they want to do. So I don't. People like me, and I know a whole lot of folks, don't necessarily support the charter school system that we have in this country because it was ill arrived on in terms of how it was developed and the whole notion legislatively how it was put on us rather than something that people examined and wanted to thought that we wanted to have in our community. You know, white folk came up with this idea about charter schools and whatnot, you know.
Okay. So yeah, I said before, Charles, in the sense of the charter schools and the PRUs, and we have the PRUs, which are considered the part of the pipeline. But there's no, like I said, specific intervention that's directly aimed at building aspirations of young people, especially those who are making their way through the criminal justice system.
Well, I don't believe that's the school.
Hey, yeah, we are back and welcome back. You're on Choose Research Engine. We've literally got 10 minutes to go before we've got to go. Currently speaking to Ronald A. Hampton and Charles Crichlow, both police officers, both between them serving over 60 years in the police force. Ronald in Washington, D.C., Charles right here in Greater Manchester. And they're still here, even though they are retired, serving their community, serving the world community, and they have traveled the world. Got a text that's coming here. It says, money equals power. If we as Black people had real money like other communities, I'm sure our plight would be a little more easier, I think.
Money may be power in terms of accessing certain things, but we have power as a community. We just need to use the power that we have.
Definitely.
We have power. Yeah, there's a bunch of examples of how our power exists. One of them is Black Lives Matter. One example of the power is Black Lives Matter, and it has created the change and the thirst for change that we have been in some ways on the journey for a long time. We're beginning to see that. Of course, as we talked about earlier, the cameras and other things that happen calling for accountability. But we have power. We just need to organize and coalesce and then utilize that power. Okay.
Just on the time that we've got left, because I know we mentioned it earlier, and I think it is very important. So let's go to what we said earlier, Charles, in the sense of reparation and what that actually looks like and means, and what the benefits are and benefits should be.
Yeah, well, I think reparations is as you know, we've worked on on issues around reparations over many years, but I think in the context of talking about public services, i.e. the police, I think that when we get into what I've noticed that when we get into a conversation or an interface between the police and our community, we inevitably lock horns over historical abuses. And quite often the conversation, it doesn't get past that, yeah? Mm-hmm. And for very understandable reasons. And what you find is that the police have very little understanding of, well, why are these people reacting this way? And they say, well, I'm an okay person. I didn't do this. I wasn't around in the 50s or 60s or 70s yet. So why am I getting this reaction? Yeah. And then so we never get past that. And so for me, what I see there is a need to engage in the business of repair. Is that the police, they might not automatically or instinctively think that is a job for them, yeah. But if we're gonna get past that, that locking of horns, then we gotta undo some of the things that were done in our community. And if you speak to people, people of, like, say, our parents' age group, yeah, even younger, will tell you about behaviors and the way that we've been excluded from society, and we still live with the legacy of all of that, yeah. And one of the things that when in that program, Small Acts, not this week gone, but the week before, when it really was based around a blues party, yeah. And there was a scene in that movie that was really interesting, where there was a brother. He was trying to get in the blues, but he was breaking into a telephone box. Yeah, he was basically a criminal, as as it was being depicted. But the brother, he wasn't going to let him in the party. Yeah, but then when the police pulled up outside, yeah, he let him in straight away. Yeah, and so there was an understanding that actually the blues was a sanctuary for our people during those times, because our community was under pressure from the authorities, from Babylon, as we say in our community, yeah. And so all that exclusion, yeah, that's had an impact on how we socialize nowadays. Yeah, there were areas in and around our community that we don't even dare to tread, actually. Where there's no sign that says, well, you can't go there or you can't go this place. Yeah, but you were still confined by our past. And I think that we have to, if we as a nation, yeah, we have to engage in that. We have to come to the table and engage in that conversation. We can't just say, well, let's just move on, right? Because it doesn't work that way.
Did you want to add to that or say something, Ron?
Well, I agree with Charles, and I've seen that here. There are communities in this city where Black folk wasn't allowed to go doing segregation and Black codes and all of that. And even after desegregation and you could go around freely, they still didn't go to those communities. They didn't participate or go hang out in those communities. They continued to hang out in this because it was a taboo, and it was part of the history of the past. And we still remember that. That's why I agree with you, Charles. We need to have that discussion and talk about it. One of the things this guy did here in Washington, D.C. some months ago, and he introduced this series of training exercises to the police department. And the training had to do with why Black folk in Black communities have problems with the police, or why they dislike the police. And it was a 3.5 hour conversation. And then after that, they took the class over to the National African American Museum for History and Culture so that they could see. Some of these guys never been to, not just white guys, some of the Black guys never been over there. And then the chief took his daughter over there, white chief took his daughter over there. And the chief tells this story himself, said that his daughter went through the museum, and then when they was leaving, she turned to her father and said, well, Dad, why didn't they tell me about this in school? And this that she was talking about was the stuff that she saw in the museum related to Black people. Well, they're not going to talk about that in school. That's not what they're going to talk about. That's America's ugly history and the lesson of slavery and discrimination in this country. But I went down there and went through the course myself because I wanted to see some of the reaction of the white and black officers to this information that they didn't know. And a lot of them was very, very much younger than I am. So some things they just didn't know. So, but the real question is not how they responded during the actual session. To what extent is it sticking with them while they do the job? Paying attention to that. Did the idea that when a white police officer stop a black man in the car, it causes him to be tense and uneasy? Did he understand why that happened? You know, because in our community, there's the talk. There's this talk that we have with our children to talk to them about how to handle police stops, whether it's in a vehicle or pedestrian, because that's been the history. And you just can't discount that history. Because even though that officer wasn't around 40, 50, 60 years ago, he's carrying on and responsible for the continuation of the systemic racism and white supremacy that the institution is heaping on our community based on the color of our skin.
And I suppose for some, in some way, it serves a purpose to have that kind of not mindset. I don't know why, but you know that there are people that have come into your community, don't know anything about the community, and are not even going to the right places to find out about the community. I mean, I met a regular police officer with a car full of PCSOs on Sesborough Street, Charles. And and I stopped them. I stopped him in the car and I said to the officer who was driving, who was a white officer, and the other officers, there was an African officer, there was a couple of Asian officers. And I said to them, have you just been round the corner there? Has he just took you on a tour of what used to be Gooch Close? And they just all started looking at each other as if to say, how did you know? How did you know that? Yeah. And then they got out the car and I had a conversation with them about the fact that they shouldn't only be doing that. It shouldn't only be taking them to the so-called historical areas where people lost their lives. Yeah. There's places where there are people in the community doing a lot of positive things and actually wanting to get involved and work with the police. But when you're talking about this repairing, Charles, and Ron, and making it actually happen, first of all, there has to be a level of patience. There has to be a level of understanding of how long it took to get to this point. You know, when we're getting like the Race Relations Act, I think it's 60. Was it 65 and then 67 and then 76? You know, that's just a little of how far we're going back to as to why those laws had to come into place in the first place. You know, but again, it has to come from either from the community to say until that's done, we're not going to do or we're not going to take part in or blah, blah, blah. Or it's got to come from another place to acknowledge, look, the statistics or the facts are not lying. There needs to be a change.
Precisely. I mean, you just gave a perfect example there where you stop those people in the vehicle, because that is a perfect example of the continual falsification of our history and who we are as a people, and part of the job of repair is actually is stemming that type of behavior, because that's where the whole intergenerational trauma, but there's an intergenerational oppression. So what they're doing is training those officers, passing on behaviors onto a whole new generation of officers. Now, until we engage in saying, well, okay, this is where it stops, and deal with do the repair job, that's what you're gonna get.
See, that's the systemic part of what we're talking about. That built into the system, so it's a continuation of it. And you don't have to look for it. It's already built in there. So how do we change it? We really have to, excuse the expression, you almost have to throw the baby out with the bathwater, because if you don't, then it's a part of the everyday occurrence of what they do.
Definitely. Got a couple of texts that's coming. One says, yeah, this is from before, says, yeah, but behind BLM, Black Lives Matters, have you not heard who's behind it? A billionaire. And then another one says, we are complicit in this theatre they have created. We keep a lot of people on huge salaries. Great champions, guys. And that's from Lorna. Thank you.
But let me ask you this. I mean, I don't know them personally, but I met the two women who are the co-founders of Black Lives Matter. They aren't rich. They're Black women. I think one of them is even gay. So where did these ideas come from that they are millionaires and that somehow or another that something, some money is underwriting what it is that they're doing? And what to me, what I think is underwriting them is the abuse of Black men and women and children in this country by the hands of the police. So I don't, that hasn't been my experience, that they represent some large amount of money and somebody is paying them to do this.
Right, guys, listen, it's been amazing. I've really enjoyed it. I mean, wow, I know we could have gone on for another 2 days in conversation. Yeah, but thank you very much. Just any...
Thank you.
You're welcome. But just some last words, guys, in the sense of, well, you've been positive all along, and you know, it's sometimes, I don't know how to put it. You know, you're still doing what you're doing, knowing that there's still those who are still going in it and going to go through it and trying to make it easier. And I'm going to give you thanks on behalf of all of them. People who can get online and can find people like yourselves who can give them that kind of inspiration, and also for those who are not taking part in the conversation, you know, or are fearful of taking part in the conversation, when they hear this kind of discussion coming from yourselves, having gone through it, which even what you have gone through, many of the other officers you have paved the way for. They're not going to go through it like you went through it.
You hope not, yeah.
Well, yeah, I suppose.
hope not.
So any last word from you guys? So, Ron?
Oh, no, I would just say it's a heavy lift. It always is, but the energy of it gives me personally energy to somehow or another push back on it, because it's not over with. And I'd be lying if I said to you all that I wish the work that we have been doing so far has been more successful than we wanted it to be. But we've had and experienced a level of success. And I've witnessed that regardless of whether it's here, Canada, UK, South Africa. I've witnessed the success. But the thing that we have to have the energy to stick with is the continuation of it, because we're not there yet. And part of not being there yet is being honest with ourselves about what we have and where we need to go. And we can't let frustration, anxiety stop us from doing it. We have to use that as energy sometimes to be able to keep going and doing what we need to do.
Okay, thanks, Ron. Charles?
Yeah, what I would say is this: is that we must always try not to fall into despair, because the number one thing that those who want to see us fail, the number one thing they want to see us do, is to think that we're not making a difference. And we must always keep that uppermost in our minds, because when you hear people say, "Oh well, things are not changing," when it's a waste of time, that's exactly where your enemy wants you to think. But the reality is that we're on a timeline. This is a struggle, and we're carrying out a mandate that's been given to us by our ancestors. And for me, to fall into that thinking that is hopeless is a betrayal of our ancestors. And I'm not going to do that. You know, we got to push forward. And because what word of inspiration that you may give to others may be the thing that may spark a massive change. And you've only got to look at one man, a white man, put his knee on the black man's neck, and the whole world is marching, yeah? Now that's on the negative side. But how much pebbles do we throw in the river, yeah? That cause ripples of positive change. But we never see that, you see. And people don't want us to see that. So for me, we've got to remain hopeful. So I'm hopeful, I'm optimistic. Yeah, I feel positive. The challenges are huge, but I just want to encourage people to keep doing what they're doing. We got incredible people in our community working day after day, yeah? And I just want to encourage them to carry on doing what they're doing, yeah?
Excellent. Listen, guys, thank you very much. Yeah, and remember, I've still got all these questions, so it has to be a part 2. Yeah. Okay, so all the best.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ron, and thank you for everything that you've done, you know, for me personally, and that you've done for us, you know, here in the UK, you know, and I know that I speak on behalf of all the brothers and sisters that you've influenced, you know, over many, many years in this country.
Thank you, Charles. And I'll be seeing you all later. If you want to do something else, it's a conversation, and we need to continue.
Carry on. Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely. Okay,
good.
Thank you. You take care. Speak to you soon. Okay, so we have Charles Crichlow there and Ronald E. Hampton from Washington, D.C. Brilliant. Thank you all very much for your interaction. Very much enjoyed that. We will be doing a part 2. As I said, didn't really get through the questions so much to discuss. But listen, thank you again. Next week, different type of a show. Going on a spiritual tip. I'm hoping to be speaking to a brother who's going to be talking to us about inner work, breath work, sound bowls, you know, taking us on another level. So if you are a regular listener, set your scene for next week, because hopefully, I mean, I don't know, because sound bowls apparently don't travel that well over the air, but I'm hoping to be able to convince this person that I'm interviewing to at least give it a try. So maybe for about a 2-minute impact. So you might be able to sit next to your radio, turn it up a little bit, and just see how the vibrations kind of waft around you or about you. So that's going to be next week, which we're going to be talking about sound bowls, spirituality, breath work. So tune in. As always, your views and opinions are wanted, needed, and much, much appreciated. So thank you very much, and it's good night from me, Anthony. And again, a big thanks to Charles Crichlow and Ronald E. Hampton. Okay, see ya.